Yeah, so for those of you who I've not met before, my name is Chelsea Johnson, and I am a career and industry specialist, so kind of like a career advisor with ASU's Career and Professional Development Services. So a lot of career in there. We are ASU's General Career Center, so we help students of all majors and also alumni. So every service or resource that we offer is free to alumni as well. So I know we talked a little bit with some of those who popped in early, but if you all could just list your major in the chat, I just like to get an idea, and also the school year. So if you're a senior, master's level, whatever it may be, please list that in the chat so we can kind of get an idea of our audience here. Great, thank you all. Appreciate that. All right, so we got kind of a difference in range here. We got some master's level and also freshmen, which is great. So yeah, we're just gonna dive right in. Okay, good to know, appreciate that. So what I'm gonna share today is more kind of general, right? When it comes to salary negotiation or just negotiating on certain offers. I'm gonna give this kind of disclaimer that it does vary based on industry. It does vary based on the type of position. Some positions, they make it very clear at the beginning, this is non-negotiable, but there are certain things that you can still negotiate. So these are kind of general tips and obviously kind of the process for it. But I would highly suggest that when you are applying for a position and you are in that process and about to receive a job offer, and you like some help in negotiating your specific situation, please do reach out to us. I know we have some sustainability students here as well, so definitely reach out to Marcia as well. And just get some help for your specific situation because it does vary a little bit based on the situation. But with that, we're going to dive in, talk a little bit about what negotiation is, the part about self-assessment and reflection, how to do the research in order to know what to negotiate, other non-salary methods of compensation, some strategies, and we'll just kind of move on from there. So ultimately, the art of negotiation is this, and I like this definition. It's the process of you're pursuing a goal in dialogue with another person, right? But the resolution is one in which everyone should feel satisfied, right? Obviously, if the employer is not satisfied, they're probably just not even going to offer that, right? Or they just won't consider you. So obviously, it's something where everyone involved should be satisfied, including yourself. Keeping in mind that when you're applying and interviewing for a position, you're looking for a good fit for yourself, not just them looking for a good fit in you. So being aware of that. So when you're self-assessing and you're thinking, okay, I'm going to try to negotiate this offer here. What do I need to know about myself, right? So that I can offer these kind of reasons to them as to why I'm valuable and why I should be receiving this certain salary or benefit. So we like to bring these up. These are career competencies. These are things you should be thinking about in determining which of these do you possess. These are the general competencies and skills that employers across all industries are looking for. These are kind of those top skills. So if you can already go in and think about, which of these do I know I possess? How do I articulate this to the employer and make it known to them how I possess these, how I demonstrate them, and how I can bring that to their organization. And that'll help you in your negotiation. So moving on from there, this kind of is related, obviously. So what are those key attributes? What are some things that you possess that you think would be essential and helpful? I'd actually love to get some thoughts on this. I definitely don't like being the only one talking here. Is anyone feeling brave and would be willing to put in the chat or just speak out loud and say, this is a skill I have or an attribute or even experience I have that I feel like would bring value? So anything that you feel like if I were to try to negotiate, this certain skill I think could help me. And obviously this is more general, right? When you get to that point, you want to think about which skills are most relevant to that position. But I'd love to just get thoughts on that. Got one person in the chat. Nice, so time management skills. Yeah, and being able to schedule effectively. That's something that is great because it is so transferable. It doesn't matter what position you're going into, that is essential. Yeah, project management going along with that, very transferable. Leadership, yeah, prior experience, interpersonal communication skills. Yeah, that's definitely something, Jenny, I feel like just in my interactions with you, I already can tell you have that skill.
That's great to hear.
But yeah, this is good just to be thinking about, obviously, because you need to recognize your value first and foremost when you're going to go in and negotiate. So thank you all for considering that and sharing. And obviously, how do you compare to others? So it is encouraged for you to go and do as much research as possible. We're going to talk more about this in a minute. But how do you compare to others who are either in that organization, in that industry? And the way you know that is by having conversations, right? So you do need networking is part of this too. You need to be reaching out to people who are in that organization or in the industry and just talk about what skills do they have and that make them successful, and compare and think, okay, do I have those skills? Get their thoughts, their advice on how you can demonstrate those skills, how they did that when they went into the industry. So yeah, we've talked in the past about doing informational interviews. Definitely applicable here when you're trying to determine what you have that can help you to negotiate. And that goes along with what sets you apart, right? What are some more unique skills that you have with that? And then I'd say try to nail down 2 to 3, right? 2 or 3 specific achievements or experience or skill sets that do make you unique. And be able to provide those examples, obviously, when the time comes. Oh, nice. Thanks for sharing, Stephanie. Yeah, it's good to hear that somebody's been utilizing and performing some of those interviews. They're very just helpful. All right, so going along with your values still, think about any past credentials that you have, right? So whether it's certifications, what are the degrees that you have, right? What other training or education have you received? Think about this. So, you may have handled design and layout of a newspaper at a previous position, for example, and it's a very impressive responsibility, but only if it is relevant to the position that you're negotiating for, right? If it's not, then you shouldn't necessarily expect to be compensated for that particular skill, because it's all about what you'd be doing in that position. So think about, again, past titles you've had. If you held just an impressive title in the past, use it to your advantage. So did you have a respected position from a previous employer? Also think about organization titles, right? So have you worked for a well-known or successful company? That's something you can also use to your advantage. So we have a note here about measurable successes, right? So these are tangible data points, right? So for example, did you raise sales? I know we've had a couple people talking here what they did retail for a bit. So if you could find that kind of data of did you raise sales by a certain percentage, that is information that would be really helpful when you're negotiating, just talking with that employer. Did you save money for that company? Or other things? Did you organize a seminar for 1,000 guests? Or anytime you can include that data, that measurable success. We talked again already about kind of the skill sets that you have and relating them to what's relevant for that position. But think value added. So maybe you can bring excellent finance experience with you to a human resources position, right? Or maybe you have technology specialties and marketing know-how. If you speak another language, those are some things that you could potentially use when you're trying to get higher compensation. As long as they are, as long as you can demonstrate how they would be relevant. Keep in mind too, right, before you're going into this, you need to assess your needs, right? You need to know, okay, am I looking to a position that's going to be in a different state? You need to figure out what the standard, the cost of living is out there. And for that particular area, you need to figure out what you would essentially need. Now, that's not something you're going to bring up in the conversation when you negotiate, but you just need to have that in your mind so that when you do research and kind of evaluate the offer, the job offer, then you know how they align with your needs. So let's talk about that, the research that you're going to need to go in beforehand. So these are just some different sites, some different areas that we suggest would be helpful. when you're trying to find that out. So Glassdoor is a good one to go in. We highly suggest you go and look at that. You can find out salary ranges for certain areas, looking at different organizations, reviews about those organizations as well. So definitely check that one out when you're trying to just find a certain salary range. These are just some other ones as well that you can look into. So feel free to kind of take note of some of those. Obviously there's going to be a recording so you can go back and look at this, but do make sure that you're tapping into some of these things and doing that research so that you really do have a clear idea of what is appropriate for that particular position in that particular area. We're going to talk a lot. Oh yeah, Marcia, go ahead.
One recommendation I could make with glassdoor.com is to set up an account. It's free to set up an account, because if you just go in there without an account, it will limit your view. And so it's helpful to do it. I mean, I don't get a lot of emails personally from glassdoor.com, but it's just a helpful tip.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Appreciate it. All right. Okay, let's move on to the next area here. So think about, try to get to know your employer, right? Obviously, you can find a certain amount of information by really looking at that job description if they publish some kind of salary range. And again, this varies from industry to industry. I know a lot of my industry background is through education, K through 12 education and higher education, and salary is made clear right at the beginning with those, generally speaking. But do try to find that information out through their website, through their HR department, whatever it may be. And obviously, if it's listed on the job description, try to figure out their need to fill. Maybe that's helpful information. If they're needing to hire right away, they're going to probably be more willing to accommodate you in that moment. And is there any kind of internal flexibility there? Also, really make sure that you're understanding those qualifications. So something to keep in mind, for example, just as an example here, my husband also works in higher education. And again, higher education, generally, they don't allow salary negotiation very much. It depends a little bit, but he was able to do so. And it was kind of interesting. He was applying for a position out in Texas. And so we were moving across states. And he got the salary or the job offer and got to know what the offer looked like. And he was talking to the human resources department, and the person in human resources who was not involved in the hiring said, hey, you meet all of the desired qualifications on here, not just the expected qualifications, but also the desired qualifications. So you should advocate and try to get a little bit higher in the range that they're able to do. And also you should consider getting this relocation stipend, right? In addition to that. And those were things he hadn't really considered before. He was kind of just excited to be able to get this opportunity. And so because she had mentioned that, he went back to those who offered the position and shared, hey, I realized I do meet all these desired qualifications. So I would, and he had that conversation with them and was able to get that higher, compensation a little bit higher. So really pay attention to those expected or required qualifications as well as the desired ones. And if you do find you're meeting most or all of those desired, you should be in the higher posted range that they have there, or the published range. All right. We're going to spend some time talking about some of the other things to consider with compensation. You need to know what is on the table and everything on the table, not just the salary. So this is just quite a list here of some different things that you should be considering that they may be offering as well. So I'm not going to obviously go through each of these, but I just do want you to take a look at some of them and consider, what of these are most important to you? And I'd love to get some thoughts on this. So if you want to list in the chat or unmute, tell us which of these you feel like for your particular situation in life that you would want to make sure is included in that package, or that is an important kind of addition to this compensation. Health insurance and 401k, that's so important. Yeah, healthcare. And obviously not all healthcare plans are equal, right? And sometimes they offer certain plans, and if they're only able to offer certain plans and it's just not going to work for your situation, then that's something to definitely consider. Paid vacation time, yeah, that's a big one for my family as well. Education. Yeah, and those of you who are working on your undergrad degrees right now, that might be something to really look at and consider too, educational reimbursement, because there are employers out there who will help pay for some of your graduate degree programs or schooling. So that's something, if that's in your interest, to take a look at. Parental leave, thank you for mentioning that. Yeah, these are some things to consider. So when you are considering a job offer, this is the biggest piece of advice that we tell people, is to not just consider the salary. You need to consider the package as a whole and be able to talk about some of these things that are most important to you. So yeah, do come back to this and take a look at this if you ever need some ideas of what you should be looking at. But definitely some things to consider here. 1 second. Whoa. Okay. So when you're in that moment where you were assuming you got the job offer, this is kind of a process that one suggestion for considering that. So the very first thing is you should express gratitude when you're given an offer. Tell them how much you appreciate it, your excitement, your interest in it, as long as you are truly still interested. Sometimes you get after that job interview and you're not interested anymore, and you do need to make that clear quickly. But express that interest as if you're still in it. And then ask clarifying questions about the position and the offer if you have any. We're going to talk more about that in depth, but that is a good time to kind of bring up some of these things you've been wondering about with that compensation. And then ask for time to evaluate the offer. You by no means are expected, and actually you should not accept an offer right away. You do need time to consider some of those things, and it takes a minute to go through all of the information that they're providing you. You should be asking in that moment for a written kind of format of this job offer and any kind of compensation. All of that information, you should ask for that to be given to you so that you can go through and review it. One thing I suggest is checking out LinkedIn Learning for some of the just tips for this as well. We're going to go ahead and just watch a short video. This is another kind of I guess, suggestion that was given on LinkedIn Learning. But it is good. They have a whole course. This is just a video, but they have another course that is pretty helpful, and it goes into a lot of depth about these different steps in the process. Oh, now I thought it would take me straight there. I think it might be this one. Okay, were you all able to hear that, or do I need to turn? Oh, I'm getting mixed messages.
It's a little faint.
Okay,
but
let's see. 1 second.
Just in Coach, and I've
Is that
helped
better?
hundreds of job candidates land.
Okay, I'm going to start that over real fast.
I'm Linda Rayner, career strategist and coach, and I've helped hundreds of job candidates land their dream job offers. And in this quick video, I'm going to teach you an effective strategy on how to negotiate your salary in your next job offer. So the one thing that you want to remember is when it comes to salary negotiation, the best time to negotiate is right after you've received a written job offer. This is when the employer is already super interested in hiring you, and they'll be most likely to meeting your requests. So the first thing you want to incorporate is to thank them for offering you the position. You want to say, thank you so much for the job opportunity. I'm looking forward to taking on the position and joining the organization. From there, you then want to remind them of your value. So talk about a couple of key strengths or achievements that you have that are relevant to the position that you plan to bring to the role. And then the third tip is to state your desired value. So you might say, With regards to the compensation package, I was hoping to discuss it further. Based on the value that I bring to the table, I am hoping to earn X in my next role. Is this something that could work for you? From there, you want to stay silent, you want to pause and wait to see what the employer says. So to recap, make sure that you thank them for the job offer, remind them of your value, state your desired salary, and then stay silent. And hopefully this will maximize the salary that you get in your next job offer.
All right, so that is something I would, I would suggest that more so if you already have done your research beforehand and you kind of had an idea of what the negotiation, you knew what the compensation package looked like, and you didn't have any questions that you needed to clarify, then you're kind of just went into it ready to go, then that's kind of what that would look like. But it's okay if you also do this where you just ask for some time, you look through, ask those questions, those clarifying questions, look through that package, and then come and negotiate later. That's also acceptable. So I just wanted to give you a couple of scenarios with that. All right, so let's talk about if you do need to clarify the offer. These are just some potential questions that you could ask them, potentially just to get more of an idea if they are of interest to you and are appropriate for your situation. But, you know, what is the hiring salary range in case that wasn't made known beforehand? How was my offer derived based on, you know, just the organization and how they come up with those different salary ranges? Were such and such experiences considered when when you came up with this offer? Is there room to negotiate this salary, right? You can just ask them straight out if there is room for that. Can you tell me more about the total compensation package, and maybe ask for that, right? You know, what are the different compensation areas that you can offer? Those are just some things to be considering.
Chelsea, there's a few questions in the chat that I'm wondering if
Oh.
you'd be able to weigh in on. There's
Thank you. I didn't notice those.
No, that's totally fine. One of them is about this verbal offer, and if that, I think we have a little bit of some questions about what to do with a verbal offer and when can you negotiate and how should you negotiate once there's been that initial contact.
Yeah, and I'd like to get more clarification from Mariana. So sometimes you're expected to negotiate after. So is this maybe a situation where they tell you like, hey, here's the offer. If you want to negotiate, you need to now. Is that kind of what you're thinking?
Well, no, this was literally my experience because I always negotiated and I was taught to negotiate upon seeing the full written offer. And I got a call and saying, hey, we want to hire you. This is the salary we want. How does that sound? And I said, that sounds fine, but I would want to see the full offer.
Mm-hmm.
And then the offer was sent. And at that point, I kind of reached out to negotiate and I was told you already accepted. So at this point, there's no negotiations, take it or leave it. So I was just in that situation. And that was completely new to me. That's nothing I've ever experienced before. I did not even know that that's a thing that happens. So I'm just throwing it out there that I guess the lesson I took away from it was that if someone tells you a number, negotiate whenever that happens, because otherwise you're risking getting stuck with that number.
Yeah, I really appreciate you mentioning that too, because you have to be careful about everything you say, right? Because you probably said, oh, that sounds nice, I'd like to get more information, but they took it as, okay, they accepted, right? So absolutely, I think in that situation, if you definitely would like to negotiate, then I would say, thank you for sharing and kind of follow that as well, right? And I'd like to have some time to look over this offer before accepting. But thank you. That's a great example of how this kind of happens sometimes. I know Stephanie had a question here. If you get a verbal offer, is it best to negotiate back over the phone or can it be done written? That's a great question. we do highly suggest that you try to negotiate over the phone or through video chat, just because it is much easier to communicate that way. And there may be multiple questions that may need to be asked in that situation. So it is better to try to do that where you can use your voice in that way. I mean, I'm sure it's been done with written as well, but it can be a little more challenging. All right, yeah, thank you. So something that you do want to consider in that moment too, right, is through all this experience and learning and researching about this position and this organization and interviewing with them, really at that point consider, do you really want this position? You know, that's just something you want to have in mind as you're moving forward. Keep the organizational and also the industry climate in mind. I'm not going to lie, there's certain times in the economy where it's easier to negotiate and sometimes it's not, right? Where they have many, many applicants who are just as qualified. So that's something to kind of consider a little bit as well. Maybe it's, you know, just because the certain situation is such at that moment that you should go ahead and accept, but then really clarify and ask some questions about, is there going to be opportunity for the salary to increase in the future, right? And how would that look like? And really have that be part of your decision making. All right. So we're going to talk about starting the conversation. Obviously beforehand, you do need to write down your thoughts. It's an awkward moment to try and do this. Just embrace the awkward. So write down those thoughts though and be prepared. Practice that conversation as much as you can. Have a friend come talk to us or anyone involved in career, and just have them kind of practice this out with you and ask you potential questions that might throw you off for a bit, so you can learn how to think on your feet a little quick, or a little more quickly. Again, like we mentioned before, do try to have that conversation over the phone, in person, Zoom. Keep in mind too, that person that you're speaking with may not have that final authority, and they might have to go back and get more information. That might not be the final conversation, right? That might just be part of it, and that's okay. It doesn't have to be resolved or figured out in that very moment. Yeah, just some things to consider when you are starting that conversation. Here's some other just tips for success. We've got this slide and another with just some other things here. I know it's a lot, so obviously don't expect you to just kind of intake all of these, but just some things to consider. You don't want to accept just right on the spot. Generally speaking, you should at least try, right? Try to see what you can get. It doesn't hurt to do that. Obviously, confidence is huge in this. Start with positive comments. Like we mentioned before, show your gratitude and just how you appreciate them, how highly you think of that organization. Communicate your value again in those tangible terms, right? Things that are easily understood by the employer, that kind of data points that can help. I'm not going to go through each of these, I do actually want to go ahead and show you all a video of an actual conversation of someone trying to negotiate a salary. And I recognize that it is an individual who perhaps has a little more experience and they're able to negotiate certain things more. But I do think it's helpful to just see what it looks like if you've not experienced it yet. But again, do consider your situation. When you are just out of school and you don't necessarily have as much experience, your conversation probably will look different than this particular video. But you do, again, need to recognize your value and what you're bringing to the table. Couple of things here I did want to point out is you do need to know when to stop. Try to avoid those multiple counter offers. You're not buying a house here, really. You're just... You do want to try a little bit, but it's not something that should be drug out, and it will get to a point where the employer would probably lose interest if you have multiple counter offers. Yeah, we've already talked about a couple of these things. Obviously, don't negotiate if you're not interested in that position anymore. Yeah, I just want to have these here that you can read over as well. I'm going to go ahead and grab that video here. I'm not gonna lie, it's a little bit awkward, but it's good to see this. Are you all able to see the video sometimes when I go? Okay. And please let me know if you feel like the volume needs to go up.
Max, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. Thanks for taking my call.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad to. So, did you have a chance to review the offer?
I did. Yeah, thanks for giving me the time to wrap my head around it. There was a lot to pour through, so I really appreciate that. I'm thrilled about the job. I'm really looking forward to contributing to the IT project manager position. I do have a few questions, though. Is now a good time?
Wonderful. We're excited to have you on board, and we can certainly talk through your questions. If there's anything I'm not familiar with, I can bring it back to the director.
Okay, great. Well, during the interview process, there was a few things that we covered that I really felt like I'm able to offer and bring, some of this agile business process stuff to the social media collaboration that you guys are trying to work through in your company. And I really think I've got some tools to offer the younger crowd to be able to, kind of help pull that backlog of stuff back up and get everybody back up to speed. Now, I have done a little research in the area, and one of the things that I'd like to address is the salary. I felt like the offering was like a little bit low, and I feel like there's something that we could do there. So I'd love to see it come up to the 90,000 range. That would be huge for me. A couple other things that I'd like to address is it came from the interview, but the offer of relocation services. I think in order for me to get out there quickly and be able to attack this head on, it'd be great to have that offer. And this is the last thing is the vacation time. I noticed that within the package offered, there's only 2 weeks. Now, the company I'm at now has 3, which is really helpful for me because I've got a family that's out of state, which means, a little extra time for travel and all that kind of stuff. So if we could get that bumped up to 3 weeks, that would be very helpful for me.
Okay, so we can provide you with relocation to help you get here quickly, and we can give you the extra week of vacation. However, based on our budget this year and the fact that we already did come in at a higher level than expected for this position, I can tell you we're not going to be able to move on the salary right now. However, we do offer a competitive benefits package, which does translate to thousands of dollars in compensation. Have you been able to look at the benefits package?
Yeah, I did. I did have a chance to look at it. It's a really generous benefits package for sure. I am, disappointed about the salary. I do understand, budget constraints and things like that. So, I guess based on that answer, what I'd like to look into, and maybe you can help to kind of give me a little insight here, is what's the review process like? When does that come up? When would there be an opportunity for that salary negotiation to take place in the future?
Yeah, of course. Supervisors here do assessments annually, and depending on the review and your supervisor's recommendation, we could increase your salary at that time.
Oh, okay. Well, that sounds promising. I do think that I bring, a lot of things to the table here. And the stuff that I'm bringing from my previous job, I think that I'm already probably a couple of levels above what you guys are used to seeing there, So do you think we'd be able to move that process up to 6 months?
I'll tell you what, let me check with the hiring manager, but I think that could be possible.
Awesome. That would be great. I mean, that would really help to be able to kind of get me to make the decision here as quick as possible. And I really appreciate you going the extra mile on the vacation time and the relocation services. Both of those things are big wins for me. So I really, really appreciate that. Now, since we're talking about all this and we're getting it all kind of figured out, I was wondering, could we get all this in writing?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll get the written offer out to you by early next week.
Ah, fantastic. That'd be great.
I'll talk to you soon, Max.
Okay, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Oh, there we go. I muted myself. All right, so I'm going to exit out of here if possible. Back here.
See, I just put it in the chat, but that was very informative to see. I feel like it's the first time I've seen something like that. So thanks for sharing that with us.
Yeah, definitely. And I'd love to get any thoughts. I have some thoughts about it, but I'd love to hear what anyone thought as we were watching that.
I wasn't sure if it's kind of the best strategy to list all the things that you want, kind of how he listed the salary and the relocation package and the vacation time, because I felt like that partially kind of gave the I'm guessing HR person kind of a way out to focus on those other non-salary benefits, but then ultimately he kind of did get close to what he wanted. So I that's a thought that I had, but then I'm I might be wrong. Like I don't know what are the thoughts and suggestions there.
Yeah, and I definitely welcome any thoughts. Yeah, Marcia, I think you just raised your hand.
Whenever I work with students, I typically recommend that they put all the negotiation up front because again, it goes back to avoiding the counter offers. I had a student that I worked with a few years ago that kept negotiating and negotiated herself out of a job. So my recommendation is always, once you see, and I do recommend seeing a written offer of all the things that you would be receiving in that position so that you can go back through and do your due diligence and figure out what are the things that you would like to negotiate so you can suggest all those up front. And, usually with HR, or that's their job. I mean, that's typically what they are, supposed to be handling or managing on behalf of the organization. So I definitely recommend it all up front so that way the things that need to be, like, some things they can negotiate, but the other things, at least you've already put them up front so those could be discussed at a later date. I mean, it might be the next day, or they might have to review that to see if that they would be willing to have any wiggle room versus you saying, well, I want this. And I go, yes, we can go back or we can do that. And then you say, well, I also want this. And then that's what happened to one of my students. She went back she went back and forth too many times. And they said, we've decided to rescind the offer.
Yeah, great example. Thank you for sharing. I definitely agree that you do want to make that information known up front, even though it may seem in the moment like, oh, this is a lot that I'm telling them or asking of them, but it's good because then they can already look into that. Thank you, Brandon, for your thoughts here as well. It did seem like at the beginning he was a little unsure, but then that conversation, as it went through, he came out a little more confident. And it is so important to prepare beforehand. He did mention a couple of things in the video of why he's valuable, right? A couple of things he anticipates doing to or bring to that organization. You want to have those points written down as you're trying to have this conversation. So yeah, I do think, and maybe it's just poor acting, but I do think he could have sounded more excited about the position. But that's something you definitely want to make known as well at the very beginning. Couple of things that I thought were interesting that I noticed as well. When he did ask about bumping up that salary, he stayed quiet at that point and he let her answer, and he still was quiet for a second, and then she followed up with, so we can't offer you this now, but we do have this and this, right? And if he had just popped in and said, oh, okay, then she wouldn't have had that opportunity to share some of those other benefits. So that was something that I thought was good. And then, yeah, oh goodness, I had something else too, and it's just leaving my mind. But that is on LinkedIn Learning. It's just one of their sample or just negotiation salary courses that they offer. Highly encourage you to take a look at it because they go into depth about the preparation. They actually go into some of these sites that I had mentioned as well and shows you where to go in and find some of that salary information, things like that. So highly encourage you to take a look at that. But yeah, it's really good to see what it actually looks like. And it's just kind of an awkward conversation, but the more you prepare for it, the more you understand your value, it's just going to make it much more smooth. And above all, just do try to be realistic, right? And that comes with your research, knowing what is realistic, what are the realistic salary ranges and benefits packages. But think about all of these things and the climate, the economics, everything, and then just make sure that you are being realistic and know that in the future you could get bumped up, right? And so knowing that information, which I think is great, that was another thing he followed up when he found out that he wouldn't be getting that salary, at the start, he had that follow-up question of, okay, when would this be reevaluated and when would I potentially be able to get to that point? And is that a possibility? And he even asked if they could move it sooner. So there's so many things that you could potentially negotiate, not just a salary, but many aspects of what you could bring up. All right, again, for those who have not attended before any of these, here is the ASU Career Professional Development Services, our contact information. So feel free to reach out to us that way. And we're happy to, help you out with any of these kind of negotiation needs. Again, if you are in College of Global Futures, then do make sure to reach out to Marcia as well. Actually, I'm sorry, Marcia, I'm just forgetting. You meet with specifically sustainability students? No, you meet with all College of Global Futures.
I meet with all CGF students.
Perfect. Yeah. All right.
Well, Chelsea, thank you so much for hosting this. This was very informative. I feel like it was really great information. Does anyone else have any questions right now? We have a little bit of time. So if anyone has any questions they'd like to ask, now would be a great time.
Thank you, Chelsea. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm currently staff member with Solar Spell, which is within the College of Global Futures. And the main reason I joined, although this is like super helpful for future when and if ever gets to the point where I have to do negotiation for a new job, but I was just curious as far as when you're in your current position, when it gets to the time of your annual review, are there any like additional tips that you might have when you're at that point? Because I feel like maybe it'll be a little different as far as salary negotiation in a current position if they don't come with anything specifically to a review.
Yeah, that's a good question, and definitely feel free to chime in, anyone else who has thoughts. I'd say the process looks fairly similar, though. You definitely want to be able to bring your value to the table in that conversation. So be able to articulate specific skill sets or experiences, things like that, that you can tell them, hey, I've contributed this, I want to continue to do this and this, and kind of have that be your reasoning that you share with them as to why you hope to get a certain range or a salary bump. And then, just kind of leave it in their court as well, right? So some of those strategies of share those different things, try not to make it so that you're asking for one thing and then come back and do more. And then also when you do present that to them and what you would like, make sure to leave that pause, right? That moment where you let them come back and tell you their thoughts. Just embrace that awkward there. Those are some strategies I would suggest there. Feel free if anyone else has some thoughts on that.
I'll lower my hand. I had it raised, but I did want to also add with Stephanie's question, and this might be just particular to ASU, but at a larger organization, there might be what's called a compensation analyst from the HR team. So this was my experience, Stephanie, so this might be helpful to you, is ASU has a compensation analyst where they assess the market equivalent range of jobs. But here's the interesting thing. I had a recent position that I was hiring for, and the range, whenever I submitted a posting, I kept it from the prior posting, which just was a few years difference. But when HR took a hold of it, the market equivalent range changed significantly. And so the starting range was at the my top end of what I thought was the initial range. So one thing you might want to consider is reaching out to the compensation analyst to ask what the market equivalent range is for your role in the case that it has changed over time. And you already know the person, by the way, it's Alyssa. So you might want to reach out to Alyssa and just see if she can do some research in on that, because I wouldn't have known had I not posted the job. None of us would have, because they didn't assess it because the job wasn't new. So that might be one strategy. And if it's a larger organization, typically I'll see like compensation analyst titles, especially the Fortune 500, because they tend to have more staff on the HR level. That's their job, to see what the equivalencies are because of the competition, and they want to stay ahead of the competition to keep to retain their staff.
Awesome. Thank you. I had no idea that that was an option. I appreciate it.
Great feedback, Marcia. Thank you. Any other questions? All right. Well, then you can have these last 10 minutes back. Once again, everyone, I'm Jenny Strickland. I am the Student and Alumni Engagement Coordinator for the College of Global Futures. And please feel free to reach out. You have my email address if you ever have any questions, or if you'd like to be matched with someone to talk about mentorship or talk about anything career or otherwise related. I'm always here. And thanks again, Chelsea. Really appreciate it. And we'll all see you again very soon.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.